Being a parent is never easy, but in today's complicated world, it can be even more difficult to navigate the challenges of parenting. From social media use, concerned to substance abuse issues, many parents feel as if they and their kids are walking in a minefield that feels like it's getting worse. And as a parent myself, I know how good it feels to have at least a few go-to strategies that can make the journey a little bit easier. Today, I'm joined by a double board-certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist who will offer us practical tips and tools for healthy parenting at every age. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real-life question. My daughter is about to turn 11, and I'm terrified for her future. I'm worried about how to handle my anxiety, about my laundry list of worries, such as climate change, our crazy political environment, bad education, social media use, and being a working mom. I'm recently divorced, and my ex, my daughter's dad, has left the state. Would you give me some tips to help me be a good mom and prepare me and my daughter for an uncertain future? I don't have a lot of time and money, so therapy isn't an option. And with that concern as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Manly, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Manly, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are imperfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Today, I'm joined by a fabulous special guest, Dr. Debbie Raphael, a double board certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist who is also an author. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Debbie. It's such a joy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you. And you have so many credentials. You are such an amazing individual and physician, and the world certainly needs very talented psychiatrists. So thank you for the work you do. And before we launch into the topic of today's podcast, would you tell our listeners just a little bit about what makes you, you?
Sure. Thank you so much for asking. Yeah, that's a great question. I think what makes me, kind of ultimately is my desire to connect. And it's been there from the beginning. And little by little, what's gone along with that is really the desire to teach and share and help with understanding. And it's been true, like I said, I think at every stage. So at the beginning and then up till now, when I was in middle school, I became a child advice columnist for our county newspaper. And I just loved that role. And I was looking back at it recently, and I saw that I guess there was an interview at the beginning of when the column started. And I was asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I had said a writer and a child psychiatrist back when I was in middle school, 11 years old. So it's really kind of stayed. And I think a real foundation for that was my mom, as that is true for a lot of us. She was what we call my object, right? So fortunately, she did provide that support and unconditional love. And that did become a part of me, which is what happens, if that secure attachment takes place. Now, it was really fortunate because I also was exposed to what we call adverse childhood experiences. And so I had to learn along the way how to keep the sort of self-trust and ability to connect the dots as I sort of move forward because I was exposed to that early childhood stress, chaos, and trauma in the home and in our lives that also sort of did continue, in my childhood. And so I was so fortunate then to follow this trajectory of wanting to teach, wanting to help, and I started my psychiatry residency ultimately. And it's part of the training in psychiatry. There's a strong recommendation to be in your own therapy, and so I did. And I'll never forget that my therapist, she said to me, I am so surprised that you chose the husband you did with your upbringing because of the adverse childhood experiences, right?
Mhm.
So I really just came to understand how powerful it can be again to sort of connect dots for oneself to try to be aware of cycles that can take place from the activation of that stress response, and that awareness can be so powerful, and it can really affect our future relationships, of course. And so then what next, right? So then I became a parent, and that changes everything to become a parent. And I became a parent right when I started my child psychiatry fellowship. And I mean the same month, July.
Oh my.
Yeah, yeah. And it was
Wow.
amazing. It sounds like a lot. And of course it was. But at the same time, it was such a privilege because I had this baby at home. And then I had, which I was doing for the first time, right, as a parent. And then I had my patients and families and supervisors and teachers at work. And I was able to kind of really notice and reflect what was going on with me developmentally in this process and transition, what was going on with my baby and what was going on between us. And then I saw things, play out during my training and my fellowship, which were so valuable. And it helped in both directions. And so what I did was I started to keep a journal, and I was sort of reconciling what I was seeing at work and what I was experiencing and seeing at home. And it was so valuable to me that I said, I will turn this into a book. And so I kept, adding to it. The bulk of it was in those 2 years during my fellowship that I was keeping that journal, but I continued to add to it along the way. So then after fellowship, I started my working for the county and became a lead child psychiatrist there and loved it. Worked with foster kids, all kinds of different kinds of situations that we were encountering with children and adolescents and their families. And then my mother died in
I'm
20.
sorry.
Thank you. And that was another transformative event. And then ultimately, I decided I'm going to change where I'm working and work with patients across the lifespan in a group practice setting. So, a different kind of patient population group. So, I feel like I've had all these stages of growth, loss, things to go through. And so, I feel like at this stage, that desire to connect, it's still so strong, and the desire to share and support and teach with everything I've sort of garnered along the way. So that's kind of what I feel makes me me, a long answer, but it's kind of the path that I've followed.
It's a wonderful answer, and I appreciate it on so many levels. So, before we get into today's topic, because some of the questions, not all of them I have for you, actually will lead us toward answering that question, I believe, or she has a few questions in that singular concern or overarching concern. So, first off, how long ago did your mom pass? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, yeah. So it was 2016. Yeah, she'd been struggling with autoimmune illnesses, and it all kind of culminated at that time. Yeah, which obviously is a very big stress as a parent, as a person, as a daughter.
Absolutely, and especially because now I'm launching into a few of my questions. I'm aware when you say an object, I know what an object is, and I know object relations theory, which is where that comes from,
Mm.
and how important it is to internalize a healthy object. Could you explain to our listeners who may not know about that concept what we're talking about?
course. Yeah, it's so important. And there are so many different terms for this process, right? So this is one of them. But when a new baby is interacting with one of its primary caregivers, right? That reciprocity between the two and that attention is so important and valuable. And I know we hear about that, we talk about it. When you're a new parent, sometimes you don't understand the importance of it because, like, the baby can't smile yet. It can't do anything. But it's just so important to still engage in this back and forth kind of serve and return process with the baby so that the caregiver's love is internalized. Love, support, unconditional, positive regard, right? Which we say in therapy, right? So all of that can get internalized over time with the baby. And then when a baby reaches a certain stage, the baby can actually develop what's called object constancy, which means they can keep that love inside of them and almost the feeling of their caregiver still being with them, even when they're not, so that they can feel that sense of security as they move forward in the world. And so that's essentially what that means. And it's it's so important that it can feel like a lot of pressure on a parent, right? And so that's why it's also so important for parents to have their own support, right? And if they are triggered by things from their childhood, right, to be aware of that and get support around it and to learn tools. So that's what I meant by the object.
Yes, and what you were talking about essentially is the formation of secure attachment.
Exactly.
And when we have that, and then we know on the opposite end, when a parent, listeners, this never means being a perfect parent. It's not about perfection. It's one of the reasons I love the idea of imperfect love. We can get it wrong. And when we are a good enough parent,
Exactly right.
that is not my term. It was Winnicott who called it the good enough mother initially. And it's the idea that if you're present, if you can get that healthy attunement a good enough amount of times, kiddo will be okay.
Right.
It's so, don't worry about perfection. Be simply concerned with whenever you're able to show up and be present. So, and ask you another question. It sounds as if your mom
Yeah.
was a good enough parent that despite whatever was happening in the greater picture, she
Mm.
was still able to tune into you.
It was good enough. That's exactly right. And that love, it's even though it's not perfect what they can give, it's strong enough, so it's there. And then it gives you the strength to carry forward that person's strength. So that's the gift, the important gift that just has to be good enough. And when babies or little kids play with their parents and they're playing peekaboo or they're playing hide and seek, they want to be found, but they have a little period of time where they can't see them. That's kind of training themselves, right? Okay, you're not always going to be there, but you're still going to be with me. That important piece of you. So
And so beautifully how you explained how you then internalize that object and you have this internal healthy object, which is one of the reasons it makes it so hard to lose a parent when you have that kind of connection, because truly a part of them is with you. It is within you. So another question, and this goes back to something. Listeners, I'm going down this road because it does, I believe, apply to the listener's question of the day. I didn't know as much about your past, so it's so interesting how there are pieces that are related. So when you were saying earlier that you don't have your dad, perhaps maybe your dad caused chaos in the relationship, thus your therapist, when you were going through your psychiatry program, said, I'm so surprised you sounds like your husband is a securely attached, present individual. And so how did you luck out with getting that securely attached husband? My theory would be
Mhm.
because you had the secure attachment from mom, even if there were other issues going on with your dad, you likely had such a strong sense of self and then later worked out whatever issues dad, had created. by doing whatever he was doing. What is that pretty much what you've come to
Yeah.
realize?
I think so, because that secure attachment is such a foundation for the formation of future intimate relationships. And so it's another reason why it's so important. Now, sometimes when people do have an activated stress response, though, right, from early life trauma,
Mhm.
make it difficult, right? And so then we have to kind of, like, again, call upon an awareness, right, of how we are in a certain moment and also why we might have this elevated stress response, and really kind of try to put the pieces together. Because sometimes when we have that awareness, then we can validate what's happening with ourselves, and then we can make sense of it and move forward, and then choose these healthy relationships and let that secure object kind of prevail, right?
Absolutely, and I'm wondering also, I knew early on in life, I wanted to be a psychologist, early, and we share that, and I also knew I wanted to be a writer, so we share that as well. And I'm wondering, was your mom supportive of this for you?
She was so supportive along the
Mm.
way. Yeah, when she saw this is what I was interested in going into medicine. She just helped propel me forward and, again, validated me along the way, which we can talk about is one of the most important things that we can do for our kids is to validate their interests, validate their feelings, validate their experiences. And ultimately, I was able to, go to a great college, got a full ride so I could go because otherwise there's no way I would have been able to do what I did. And then I got to do what I love. And she was such a foundational part of that.
That was my gut instinct
Mhm.
because I believe when this listener's saying, "What can I do for my kiddo and for me?" We got to the heart of it very quickly. That so many times we have in our hearts a picture of what we want our kid or kiddos to become rather than, and I think this is such an important pivot for listeners to hear from your personal life because I didn't have the support you had. And so hearing how this really wonderful mother, regardless of what was happening, finances clearly weren't there. And I saw in your credentials you went to UC San Diego. It is such a fine institution. It is an amazing institution. I
Mhm.
love San Diego. And so she saw that you had this light, this
Yeah.
drive, this passion. And I have a feeling that if you had said that your light and passion was art
Mhm.
or law or combing the beach for treasures to save the ocean, whatever it would be, I have a feeling that she would have supported you no matter what.
Yeah, and fostered it. Yeah.
Yes. And so I'm glad we're starting here because you've already given us such incredible nuggets just working from your personal life about secure attachment, about the internalization of healthy objects. We can also internalize unhealthy ones, but we
Mhm.
can get to that. And also this important piece of knowing that it's okay to be a good enough parent.
Mhm.
Striving for perfection can actually cause harm. And I agree with you that the greatest thing we can do for kiddos, for anyone actually, is to be attuned to them,
Mhm.
showing up, and then, as you were saying, also validating. So when we look at what this listener's asking about with her daughter, and
Mhm.
the daughter is, pre-adolescent, just there on the cusp, and sounds like she's concerned. There's a divorce. I don't know much or anything about the father, but the father's not in the state, so it sounds like he's not present. And she's really concerned about the state of the world and all of these issues that sound like they're really beyond her control, the climate change, the political environment. It sounds like her stress and anxiety are very high. What are some thoughts you would have for her and our other listeners about in this uncertain world, whether you're parenting or a parent to a 1-month-old, a 10-year-old, 30-year-old, whatever it is, what would be some of your biggest suggestions? We already have a couple, including validate, and I'd love to talk more about validate. So let's start there.
Yes, yes. So many things. So, for the big concerns that you address, like the more global concerns, and big picture concerns like climate change and things like that, to be able to talk about it in an age appropriate way. If you're going to talk about it with your 11-year-old, in an age appropriate way, and acknowledge your worry about it. I think sometimes we try to shield or hide some of our concerns from our kids, and everything's a balance, right? So to some extent, that can be fine and appropriate and everything. But we also want to model authenticity. And if we're worried about something that could affect them, to talk about it, in age appropriate ways, and let them know that you're worried, and can talk about what maybe you can do to contribute. So, kind of action steps to help with that worry, but in an actionable kind of way. So those are just some suggestions around that, but overall to acknowledge, and like we said, to validate what the child might be worried about as well.
And thank you for that. And I wholeheartedly agree because shielding a child, pretending that the anxiety isn't there, the issues aren't there, that's not helpful. But processing our anxiety so that we're not dumping it onto a child or unconsciously making it very sticky for them. But maybe she says, her time is low, maybe talking to some of her girlfriends if she has a girlfriend or a mother or, someone in her world where she can download and talk so that she's not unconsciously taking this unresolved anxiety out onto a kiddo, regardless of what their age is. We do want to work with our stuff. We want to notice it. We want to work with it. And then maybe also if she's noticing that if she's engaging in anxiety-inducing behaviors such as doom scrolling, being on social media or news channels that only inflame her fears, perhaps doing a little bit less of that.
Oh, I agree with you in all of those ways. So finding one's village, right, is so important at every stage of parenting. Sometimes even more as the kids get older. Finding the village to be able to talk about your feelings, your concerns, your worries. A village, of course, therapy can be useful, and sometimes it's not an option, like she said, financially, but sometimes a village can be even more helpful because people are sharing their experiences and there's the kind of bi-directional connection. And so, yeah, I can't emphasize that enough, what you said about finding her village. And also exactly what you said about the doom scrolling and not modeling that, for your child as well, because then what you can get is kind of negative after negative after negative kind of input. And the more input that we have that's concerning and negative, the more it can kind of build up inside, right? So, if you're having a conversation with someone, like with the people in your village, other parents from your kid's school or from your religious community, from your neighborhood, wherever it might be, then it's more of a back and forth, and people tend to sometimes be more balanced in their communication that way. So,
Absolutely. And I love how you're using the term village because, particularly with this individual saying, I don't have a lot of extra time, I don't have a lot of extra money. And who knows if she has community around her. Yet, sometimes, I don't know if what kind of her living situation is, but whether she's in a home or an apartment, perhaps without her knowing it, there's a neighbor down the street or across the hall or a meetup group, some sort of group, or even if you're meeting where kiddos can be together in one room and the moms talk in another room and process and talk and just get it get out some of that built up stress or anxiety, it can be so helpful. And you don't have to have a big village. Sometimes your village is a matter of a few people, and that is good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To have someone who you can talk to and feel that connection with, because that connection we were talking about in early life that's so important, it continues to be important at every stage of our own development, because we're continually developing and transitioning through different stages in life, not just in childhood.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because it's so important for us to realize that we don't just become adults and end, the adult journey once we become 21, once we get, those voting rights. Our journey through adulthood is one where, especially if we're interested in evolving and transforming into increasingly better versions of the self, it is an ongoing journey. And yes, there are these periods of whether it's getting married or entering a long-term relationship, entering the career realm, having a child or children, all of these different stages, and then moving through midlife and retirement. And it is a journey, and one where if you're a parent, I don't know that the parenting energy, they get launched, but still being a parent continues throughout the lifetime.
Definitely, definitely. And the parenting journey is one that is accompanied by so many factors that I feel aren't talked about enough. And I've come to develop that feeling really as a parent and as a child and adult psychiatrist, because I've seen, the stresses like this parent is talking about that just can get compounded over time. And they seem really not to be sort of addressed enough, certainly, but even talked about enough. Just at the end of 2024, the U.S. Surgeon General came out with an advisory. I don't know if you saw it. It was an advisory about stress in parenting.
Yeah.
And it was called like Parents Under Pressure. And, it was supposed to be, I think, a wake up call. Like, our parents are stressed because there's so much on them. And it was really so many of the things that this parent, I think, was talking about. And, it seems like parents, there are a number of double binds, right, that parents find themselves in. I'm sure single parents, which my mom was a single mother, more than others. And these double binds, can really elevate stress. And especially for people who maybe already have an activated stress response from any kind of trauma or adverse experiences in their childhood, that stress is going to be even harder, to tolerate, and they're going to need even more support. So I think the overall sort of stress that parents are exposed to is something that does need to be talked about, acknowledged, and validated. Even if there's some things we can't fix some of it, at least to validate it can be really, really stabilizing and promote people's well-being if it's acknowledged and validated, some of the things parents go through. So,
Absolutely. And before we launch into validation just a little bit more, I love that you brought up the double bind. For listeners who might not know what you mean, how would you explain that?
well, double bind, it's like there's no right answer. Like there's nothing you can do about it. So I'll give you an example of something that I've thought about along the way in my own parenting is, my husband, he's also a physician. He's a pediatric oncologist. And so very busy job. But for anyone with sort of these, usual jobs where they go to work in the morning and they usually come home at night, oftentimes they have to be at work. Regular adults have to be at work between 8 and 9, which is around the time or exactly the time when children need to be dropped off at school. And so this means, like, maybe this single mother, I don't know what kind of a job she has, but you cannot drop your child off at school and be at work at the same time. It's not possible. So what do you have to do? You have to strategize. Am I going to hire someone to do it? Am I going to work out a carpool? It's this added layer of stress that just doesn't seem to be acknowledged. That's just one example, but there really are so many for parents where they're kind of expected to be in the regular adult world, whether that's in the workplace or whatever, but they're expected to do that in the regular way without thinking about the needs of their kids, which are also usual needs. So this is not even talking about like kids with special needs and things like that, but even just the regular situation for parents.
Absolutely. Where the double bind, as I see it, and I agree with you, is that you just can't, no matter what you do, you can't get it right.
You get it right, can't
You,
win.
you can't win. And it's often, I hear about this a lot from clients where they say, I stayed home and worked from home to take care of my kiddo, but the kiddo needs so much attention that I think I'm giving them less attention than if they were in daycare. They're trying to do the right thing, what they perceive to be the right thing, but it's still not working out. And I think I agree with you. Parenting is filled with so many double binds, and we don't even realize it. We don't realize, and parents who talk to me, I help them see, and it's so, as you say, validating for them to realize, oh, no wonder I couldn't get it right in air quotes, no matter which direction I went.
Mhm. Right. So just to validate it, even if you can't fix it right now, hopefully in time, things can change a little bit, a little by little in society for parents to support parents better because there's so much value in supporting parents when we think about it. When we think about the costs involved, in treating people with postpartum depression and treating kids for the medical sequelae of trauma they might experience because of very stressed out parents and things that can happen in the home, right? So it really would serve society quite well, I think, to support parents more. But in the meantime, we can validate the experience, which can be very, very positive and helpful as well.
So let's now dive into the important skill of validating. And for many people, and a lot of people say, I just want to be validated. I just want to be heard. And yet the parent may be sitting there with a teen and the child's experience is, oh, you're a horrible mother. You never do anything for me. And the parent's sitting there going, oh my goodness, if you only knew how much I sacrifice and how tired I am. So both people want to be validated. The parent wants to be seen. The child wants the parent to know how ignored and marginalized they feel or whatever it is. How would you navigate? I can imagine with this mom, perhaps that's coming up where she wants to validate whatever her experiences are and maybe things that are going to start coming up for the kiddo.
I would say, if it's possible, to step back and view parenting and what you're doing with your kiddo as a job. It can be easier because the thing about parenting is the personal and then what you should be doing, or you can view it as professional, as a job, right? They get so intertwined. And so our own emotions can really contribute to these interactions with our kids when really some of it might not be the place, to do that, right? So if we can step back and view it as a job, then we can realize validating my kid is like so important right now. Even if they're calling me names, even if they're saying, I do so much more than you. How can you say that? Now, in reality, that's not the case, right? Or maybe it is on some level. But regardless, whether it is true or not, it's their truth in the moment and it's their experience, right? So it's our job as parents to validate and to acknowledge their experience. So not agreeing with the words that they're saying, but to acknowledge that this is what they're experiencing and what they're feeling. And if they feel heard and they feel validated, what's going to happen? More than likely, a sigh of relief a feeling of being understood. And then, if they're understood, the ultimate trajectory for that, if these interactions continue to happen this way, is them trusting themselves and their own feelings and their own experiences. And more than anything, that's what we want for our kids, right? And if they're ultimately doing better because they trust themselves, they're more confident, there may be better outcomes. Ultimately, what's going to happen from that? It's going to make our lives easier. It's going to make our lives easier. So it's worth it to step back and try to view this as a job, even if you're so mad about what they're saying because it's not true, right? Or maybe you don't think it's true, or it's invalidating to you as a person. The thing is, I know it sounds so hard, but it's not their job to validate us as parents. It's not. We need our validation and we need to get it somewhere else. So that's just the reality. It's one of those really, really hard realities of being a parent. But if we can validate each other, if we can read some books, like hopefully my book, right, to validate the parent, that can be very, very empowering to us as people too, because parents are people. We matter. We absolutely matter. And at the same time, we care about our kid and they're doing well does help us. So remembering that too is really
Absolutely. It's that circle. And I think with your book, giving, support for parents who understand that this child parent journey, even if it's been rocky at first, let's say somebody is listening to this podcast and they have a 6-month-old or somebody who has a 16-year-old or a 26-year-old. It's never too late, in
no.
my opinion, to shift. If you're listening, listeners, you go, oh, I don't validate my child, or I tell them that their experience is wrong, or when I'm anxious, I've been crying all over the place and I see my child get anxious as though it was contagious. That's okay.
Yes.
Now your eyes are a little more open. Your heart's a little more open to other ways. So I believe, and it sounds like you agree, and I imagine your book really speaks to this, that we can always shift for the better.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that. And you know what you were saying about, oh, if you're crying in front of your kids and they, that might make them more concerned, sad, anxious. That's also modeling for them, though, your emotions. And so that's okay. Being aware of it and the impact on them, of course, is good. But at the same time, that modeling and authenticity is important as well. But I also very much agree with what you were saying about, if someone hasn't been able to validate the way that they would have wanted because of their own emotional state, that's okay. And to be aware of it moving forward can be very, very healing to both parent and child, no matter how old the child is. And also, even going the additional step, if someone is so inclined, right, to try to repair and apologize. And it's amazing the power of the apology, a parent to child at any age, even when they're little. For a parent to apologize to a kid can be so valuable in so many ways. So repairing what happened and making the kid realize, oh, okay, that wasn't okay, and then putting that in perspective so that they know. And showing, of course, the parents caring and modeling that you can repair. If you do something that you're not proud of later and wasn't in the service of the relationship, but things do happen, you can repair it. And that's just so important relationally as we move through life for everyone to know that.
Absolutely. And before I talk a little bit more with you about the repair, I love you brought up the part about, being able, if you need to, if you're in a situation where you feel really, really sad and you're crying or you're feeling anxious, it's not about hiding those emotions. It's about, as best you can, modeling how those emotions are handled in a healthy way. So not expecting the child to fix your anxiety or fix your sadness or fix your fear, but having the child say, oh, I saw this or this happened and I'm very sad and this is what I'm going to do. Or right now I just need a timeout to cry, but mama's going to be okay. And so that the child isn't put into trying to save you or fix you because they're still learning how to do that for themselves.
Exactly right. Yeah, and just remembering the roles, right? The parent role and the kid role. It really is that. And so thinking about where we are in development along the way and where our child is in development can always serve us so well too. So that whatever the interaction is happening between us and our children, we can reflect and ask ourselves, is what's happening in the service of their development, right? So if you find that they're actually acting like the parent in a certain situation, then you can kind of hopefully, think about that and reflect on it and realize, oh, wait a minute. Okay, maybe we want to change this dynamic a little bit because it's not really in the service of their development right now. They're going through their own stages. We're going through ours. None of it is easy. But if we can remember to allow these stages to happen according to where someone is in his or her development, that's in everyone's interest.
Absolutely. And you had said earlier how you had gone through, touching again on the fact that you went through therapy as part, I know in my doctoral program and my master's program, we were required to do therapy, which I think is a fabulous idea. Clean up your own issues. And we forget that as parents, we can be better parents, particularly if we have an insecure attachment style, if we have some sort of unresolved trauma. So even though you have secure attachment, you realized you had some unresolved issues because of the other factors in your life. And again, I know our listener and many listeners don't have the ability to access private therapy, but I always love mentioning that there's bibliotherapy. So a book like your book, finding a good self-help book. It's one of the reasons all of my 4 books have exercises in them so that people can't afford therapy. You can get a book for a cost of a couple of cups of coffee. And, your book is the same, where they're not tremendously expensive, but they are tremendously valuable. And even if you don't sit and read it in a weekend, if you read a page a night before you go to sleep, it is so helpful because if we don't resolve our own issues, we will tend to pass them on to our children, and they will tend to be, I think, boulders sometimes in between the parent-child attunement because, and this is no shame, no blame to listeners, to anybody, but if we have huge issues going on inside of us, it's going to be really, really hard to properly attune to a kiddo. We're going to get activated by them. We're going to get angry. It's easy to get angry at, irritated at a child. Your eyes are getting so big. But if we don't tend to our own issues, then we have that intergenerational transmission of them that we don't mean to do.
That's exactly right. And that intergenerational piece, it looms so large.
Mm.
And it's another thing that I'm not sure if it's recognized enough from, just people, parents trying to parent their kids, that sometimes these issues from their parents can unconsciously, meaning not in their awareness, can contribute to a relational or behavioral cycle that can continue. And so the more we can be aware of what's happening, the better. And that's where that bibliotherapy can be so powerful, right? If you're reading about someone else's experience who went through something similar, and maybe what they were going through, what they did about it, what they continue to do about it, it can be very healing, because then what can happen is what's maybe in there in the unconscious mind can become more conscious, and awareness is key.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about the work that you do is for someone who can't access or afford a child, adolescent, or adult psychiatrist, It's not a replacement for that one-on-one in-person, connection. But if it is good enough sometimes to read the words of wisdom, to be able to internalize them, and to have, within that book, you get a professional on your bedside table.
Exactly right. And my hope would be that it could be preventative too, so that someone doesn't get to the point of needing a child and adolescent psychiatrist, right? Because if something like this can provide the empathy, the tools, the strategies, the validation that's needed, you know, then maybe they can get their village. And then they have people, even if it's one or two, in their corner who they can share the day-to-day struggles with, which can be so powerful. Or they can then learn to validate and how important that is to prevent outcomes or the sequelae, as we call them, of maybe doing things in the opposite way or something like that. So,
Well, thank you. And I know we're running short on time, so just one more thing that you had brought up, the ruptures, and
hmm
how important it is for us as human beings to know that ruptures happen in relationship. Things break. We get it wrong. And how important it is, especially when there's a child involved. But when the kids are adults, it can be both ways. I mean, sometimes the kids do things in adulthood where it's their turn to repair a rupture. But looking at rupture repair in an intimate relationship, parent-child or otherwise, how important it is to be able to make that apology, that sincere apology, which involves saying, I am sorry for XYZ. And this is what I will do in the future to try to avoid that. And I love that strategy because I know if I get something wrong, I will say to the person exactly that. I'm so sorry that I hurt your feelings. I didn't intend to, but I can see this in the future. I'm going to, try to do this in the future. But if you ever see something that I do in that, and let me know, and I will correct it in the moment. I will do, because when we allow ourselves to repair the rupture, that creates, not only is it a gift to the self, but it's a gift to the other human being of being seen, being validated, and then strengthening that bond of connection that comes with somebody seeing that they created an owie and that they're going to do their darndest not to create the same owie again.
Exactly. I completely agree with all of that. Yeah, and it just reinforces also the idea of how important it is to listen to our kids. In my book I talk about how when my older son Seth was young, very young, he brought to my attention, he said, "I don't like the way you're talking to me right now." And I was able to reflect, largely because I think I was going through my child and adolescent psychiatry training, which was very, very powerful and good for me. But I was able to step back and reflect and think, oh boy, he doesn't like the way I'm talking. And so then I did say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And then I tried to put the pieces together. And so listening, to someone else, if something really is going awry, and then backtracking and trying to redo, replay, and repair, I think is so important.
I love that. Redo, replay, repair. And it's not about blame or shame. It's about the awareness, the awareness, the awareness. And awareness doesn't come overnight, especially if you didn't have good models for parenting. It's, something that we grow over time. So we're not going to get it right. And
Mhm.
most of us, aren't going through training as we're parenting to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And Sometimes, like in my case, it wasn't until, later. So we want to be able to look and say, okay, for our listener who wrote in and all the other listeners, work, trying to offer a synopsis here of work on yourself. Do some self-work. If you know you have some wounds in there, if you don't have secure attachment, you can work to earn it. You don't need to go to therapy. It helps. It so helps. But there are good books out there. There are support groups that are low cost, sometimes no cost. And again, parenting books. There are some, and your book. I mean, there are so many ways to get resources. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you're reaching out for resources. It means you're a person who cares, like this mother who's saying, I don't want to cause damage. I'm seeing all of these things and I'm scared. It's easy to get stuck in being scared. And so what I really hear you saying is be proactive, get support, create a village, talk about things with your kiddo in age appropriate ways, not like she's your best friend but more like, hey, tell me what you're worried about. Are you anxious about anything? How are you feeling? And in that way, they can actually do this mother-child journey together, navigating this really uncertain space of life in ways that helps each of them to feel safe and secure. What do you think?
Yes, yes, I agree with that. I agree with it completely. Yeah, the parent tending to their own needs, kind of a little bit of outside the relationship with the child so that they can be as present as possible in their job as parent, right? And also just to say that the being there, being present, kind of as simple as that, is so powerful as well. And so for parents to cut themselves some slack is really important, so that they can know that their everyday interactions with their kid are so valuable just in and of themselves.
Absolutely. And it's not always about doing more for the kid. It's about whatever time there is, cooking dinner together, kiddos doing homework, sitting next to kiddo doing some work in a self-help book or some self-care reading, even if it's, a romance, whatever it is that time together. Time together. And, oh, Dr. Raphael, it has been such a delight. I am so grateful for your time. Are there any other final pieces that you want to share?
Gosh, well, I just want to thank you as well. This has been such a pleasure talking with you about all these very, very important and valuable topics. And thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure. And listeners, all of Dr. Raphael's information will be in the show notes, so you don't need to worry about writing it down. But her name is Dr. Debbie, Debbie, Raphael, Raphael. And you can find her at where, Dr. Raphael?
I do have a website, debbieraphael.com. I'm also on LinkedIn under the same name.
Excellent, listeners. It'll all be in the show notes. You'll be able to find Dr. Raphael. You'll be able to find access to her book. She's also has other articles, other publications, so you will be able to find her quite easily. Thank you again, Dr. Raphael, for being with us today. We are very blessed. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for your time, your energy, for tuning in. It is always such a treasure to share time and wise information with you. So thank you again. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanly.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Manly wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And, as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.